Okay, we're here with McKay Erickson, so go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe where you're from, who you are, and why you're doing this.
Okay.
And then we'll get into questions.
Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all. These are the kind of meetings that I really like. In front of a lot of people, I'm not the greatest thing. I've told a lot of people that I'm all this fifth, sixth generation Wyomingite that's born and raised here. I've lived here with the exception of my 4 years of getting an education and a mission to I've lived in Star Valley, been back and forth. I want to kind of get right into why I run. I guess that's probably the most important thing to me. I've had a lot of questions about that, and almost everybody, when you run for political office, they want to know, and they're very hesitant. Oh, you got to have some axe to grind, or you got to have some issue that you're looking for, or some power to gain, and things like that. And I think that's the greatest thing that I've got going, is that I honestly felt like I couldn't take it anymore, and I have always kind of been geared up towards running for office. I taught school for 30 years, and then I've run my own business for 23 of those years, on summers and every weekend and at night. And even employed some very sketchy individuals such as Nick. Don't know that I did any good, but the big thing of that was I taught U.S. government, and it had a lot of emphasis on everybody's got to have an opportunity to serve and get involved. And when I say get involved, I love groups like this of people that love their liberty and want to get together and kind of join forces a little bit, but especially I love the idea of getting involved. I've been to hundreds, if not thousands, of community meetings and things like that, so kind of on a lower level of government involvement, and I always had a unique experience in that there were a lot of people that came and expressed that I kind of had a little bit of a way about bringing people together, and so I feel like I'm going to take that to the Wyoming legislature, and that's going to be one of my key features. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we'll jump right into it. There's such a atmosphere in Wyoming politics right now, as you all know. It's a dogfight, and the dogfight that's going on is unfortunately some trends, and the thing that scares me, and you could use a lot of places like this, but Colorado especially, that's very much a conservative, or at one time a very conservative state, and the Republicans split themselves in half, and now we have an ultra blue state in Colorado, and there are lots of people that absolutely detest that, as they should, and I just hope that doesn't become part of where Wyoming's headed. But I see some signs of that. However, I'm not going in there any way reactive. I'm going proactive, in that if I cannot make a difference and be able to find a consensus of people that love liberty and love the United States and love Wyoming and the way of life that we have here, especially in Star Valley, then you won't see me continue it. And I don't mean to sound like I'm going to give up, but I really feel like we can make some positive change, and we can bring some people together that have simply voted on bills in the Wyoming legislature. I could pull out 15 or 16 bills that were simply killed because of one name that was on it, and they had such a bad taste for that person's name that they went in either in committee and didn't even let them out onto the floor. As last year, it was a record number of bills that didn't even make it out onto the floor. They were all killed in committee because of a consensus group that got together and said, we don't want this because this is the person and this is what they did to my bill last year. And I think that's ridiculous that Wyoming is in that situation, where we are tremendously blessed with lots of resources and lots of ways to do things in a unique way that would make us a much stronger state. And so sometimes makes people cringe. And I won't say that I'll work with a Democrat that has a good idea, but anyone else that has a good idea, I will work with them, because I think that's what we've been missing, especially the last 2 years in Wyoming legislature, and it has caused us to lose traction on some very good bills and some things that you and I would be very much benefiting in this tax reform, property tax reform.
Oh man.
You know, there's some things that were sitting on the table that we probably wouldn't be talking about it as much. We'd still be talking about the outrageous cost of living and things around here, but we would have a lot better grasp on it. And that's why I'll get right into it, because it's the number one issue. But that's why I do support the idea that allows, instead of making ballot initiatives to where, and I signed the initiative to cut property tax by 50%. My name's on it, my wife's name's on it, and I thought that was a great idea. However, there's a bill that is headed there that gives the legislature a little more opportunity to work, instead of just a 2-year budget, to actually work out some things. And it's looking as if it's going to pull out about half of the residential property tax that takes homes out of property tax and shifts the tax burden to more of a consumption tax. And so the more you have of that, that's the more you pay. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. Any tax is not a good thing, but it sure helps when you take the stress off of families and people like us. Everyone's in the same boat of having them triple and quadruple of taxes and not know where it's going.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is what are they doing with this extra money? And I had expressed my concern all the way along through the legislature as they were headed for that, because the legislature put away $1.3 billion this year, and then let property tax continue to hit like it did. You know, and I'm all for savings, don't get me wrong, but I really, if I would have been there, I would have pushed hard to actually spend that money in giving tax relief, or at least invested in some alternative ways of looking to raise that money that was passed directly on to you and I as property tax. And there's, of course, a whole bunch of different things that we can talk about there. I don't have all the answers by any means. I'm not saying it was perfect, but I think just my philosophy and my idea that has quite a bit of support, that people want some things done that are permanent and not just two-year flash in the pans. And so I hope it becomes part of the legislature's responsibility. And the thing that I like about that is the legislature then can't go and say, oh, well, that's this, that's that. It falls right back on the legislature to make sure that we do have the funding that we need. Never ever would I suggest of growing government. Shifting, we got to make sure that we're shifting that emphasis and not continuing to spend money. You probably all heard of the one that's, again, it was kind of the lightning rod, I guess you could say, of Governor Gordon's flawed policy, in that he called for $700,000 to put Wyoming's afloat in the Rose Parade, and
Wow.
and it got killed right off the bat. But that was kind of what he said. He said, oh, we've collected so much more because our gas and oil did so well, and then coal, as you know, the last 2 years have actually been doing quite well, because obviously we're not ready to compete with our green energies, and they're a long ways off from actually market competition. And of course, I'm a major, if you can't pay your own way, there shouldn't be any subsidies whatsoever for that. and there are a lot of folks getting extremely wealthy off of straight subsidies because it's and you know, we can talk about the windmills not lasting long enough, but you could go through the majority of green energy right now, and they would not even be talked about if the government hadn't been subsidizing up to 60 to 70% of their budget. And with Wyoming having the resources that we have, we've got to make sure that we have a governor, and he'll be gone in 2 years, but a governor that will go to bat for Wyoming industries. I mean, if you watched, he went back and spoke at Harvard, I believe, and he's just like, yeah, coal's gone and it's out of there. And that drives me crazy, not because I'm a big coal stacks everywhere, but the technology that has come around in fossil fuels, and we are filthy rich with it, and probably will not have a lot of other revenue sources. So why aren't we going with that technology and following that trend and supporting that 100%? I mean, it just, and he started to feel a little bit of you and I's concern about that, and he's kind of made an about face. But there for a while, he was ready to jump 100% on board with eliminating fossil fuels and getting going not completely, but more green energy, because he could see the wind farms coming in and the solar, but that's hard to tax those. But yet, I believe they should pay, if not as much, more. And people say, well, that's just your subsidy money that's being spent. And but yet, I think that would help more people understand that you're not cutting it with those resources. Go ahead.
Question, Whitey. What about obviously one of the big questions is, you know, we're looking at a national divorce coming up. What's going to be your stance when that happens in terms of Wyoming and supporting, potentially, as wild as it may seem, but we got to come to terms with it. What could be such, like, you know, certain states decide to leave and go together? I mean, you know, what are we, $34 trillion in debt? Clearly, it's just, we're all just getting numb to the idea that it's not going to explode at some point or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What are you going to do, I guess, for Wyoming in terms of, you know, helping to facilitate what is obviously probably going to happen?
Well, I think, like I said, I'm encouraged after the big debacle of this year's legislative session and the criticism of Gordon. I think that he recognized very quickly that people are serious about their politics, in the fact that we don't want to be part of the trend that is simply melting under the pressure of that. And I'm not saying I'm supporting breaking off, but I definitely think that there's traction growing for. States are sick of it. States are sick of the federal overreach. States have had enough, and states are all in almost every legislature. They're calling for states to become more independent from the federal government, quit accepting so much money, because there's always strings attached to everything that you do if you take federal grants. And so, yeah, you know, I don't know that I have the perfect answer for that, but I want to just talk about there's definitely a feeling and a movement that is making people take second note and saying, you know, that could be a reality coming down the road.
Okay, another question for you. Within the state of Wyoming, we obviously sort of have this thing where we think, oh, we're all these out there go-getters, you know what I mean, work hard for your money, yada yada, you know, and we're sort of a limited government state.
Yes.
We feel like, but per capita, I believe, unless I'm wrong, somebody can correct me, we're one of the highest states in the nation of people that are receiving some sort of government check.
Yep.
In one way or another. I think we are the highest, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah.
Meaning, like, they work
well,
for
per capita,
town,
because
school, county, the state, what are you going to do, for example, within the reach of what you can do, like YDOT, for example, one of the biggest bloated jokes of all time, right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to be able to help fix that so that we keep some of our money?
Oh yeah, and it's
More of our
you know, you have to look at number one. I don't mean to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but the numbers that show with us just 517,000 people in the state, and such a big state, it obviously costs more money to run that state because we're so spread out and we have so much federal land in the reaches. It's 60%, and then goes all the way up to 80% between state and federal land in Wyoming. I mean, we have a lot of that, and that's hard to gain revenue off of, you know, especially when the new Biden proposal is to shut down everything up around Gillette, Powder River Basin for all coal development within a few years, you know. And boy, how else do you gain money? Back to your point of Wyoming and the high spending per capita, is that's definitely something that people need to be more aware of, is that we are, and I've seen top 10 for quite a while, you know, schools, roads, we spend a lot of money, there's no doubt. And that's always a concern to me, and people say, well, we've got the resources, let's keep spending it. But if you look at 70 to 75% of the property tax goes directly to schools, and then the other 25% roughly goes to government entities, and then they all have their individual accounts that come from different mineral extraction and different things like that go into keeping that government going. But you know, the one thing that kind of relates along that is, say for example, our YDOT has went up, and I can't remember the numbers, and plus hard to make statistics work for everybody because you can make it out to be whatever you want, but Wyoming has taken a hard left under Governor Gordon in accepting federal money with huge strings attached, and that will be definitely one thing. And there's already people, that some senators and some House of Representative members, or some that are trying to be a candidate for, that are talking about we need to get away from the public pork because it has strings attached to everything. If you remember the Healthy Foods Initiative by Michelle Obama, better be careful
Big
of
Mike.
Yeah, and they come in and said you can't. And it was when I was at the school and student council, and we used to make a ton of money off of the pop machines, you know, and it come back into, it was all student projects. She came in and says you can't sell pop anymore there, and it made it to where if sugar was the first ingredient, you couldn't sell it. So Heidi and I used to run down to Walmart in Idaho Falls and buy the products, and we were always searching for the second ingredient being sugar, and then you could sell it. that shows you how crazy that is to shut everything down. And all that happened is, and I swear they were bringing it back. Cooper Weston was one of the greatest ones, because he had out of his locker, he had pop and candy in there and sold it out of his locker. Bridge tells the story. There you go. There's a capitalist at his best. But you know, they wouldn't let you get it out of the machine. But Maverick was making, I'll bet their profits went way up those first couple of years, because kids would just go down and buy twice as much as they would just punching out of a machine. But we got tied into all that money, and YDOT is filthy with federal money. And they say, hey, what about, we got the interstate that goes through. You know, that's why we seek so much federal money. But the amount of taxes that we pay on the gasoline tax, which, correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 25 cents per gallon that goes in, and a lot of that money was supposed to come back into Wyoming roads. Well, lo and behold, that money was coming back like here 5-6 years ago when they mag watered the Grace River Road, the once that they've done it. Come to find out, it was all gasoline tax that the federal government sent back to Bridger Teton, not to any of the counties and not to any of the state, but the federal government to do that project. They say, hey, this is great. We're spending all this money collecting all of it, and it's actually coming back, and then they sent it to the circus to decide where that money went. And that's
So how are you going to fix that then? Because a lot of times, like when it came to the budget, Summers, when the Republicans walked away, Summers just said, okay, well, you guys are off, I'm on, and he got one of his buddies who he bribed with a few $1 million for a new football field in Casper.
Harsh.
How are you going to get around that? How are you going to fix that?
Well, that's got to be something that I think you'll see a change in leadership, at least atmosphere of leadership, because I really believe that there's a strong, healthy appetite for that, and like I said, I may be too optimistic in this, but people are sick of it. People are sick of of what's happening there, and how those bills were assigned by Summers and Driscoll in the Senate, and the leadership that was just good old boys at its best. And let's continue to tax and spend and glutton, and so I think you'll see more of an initiative to actually bring more back from the people, because I don't know, maybe did you notice clearly a different atmosphere after the legislative session, and how many people were disgusted in how it was run and how the fat continued to roll?
Well, Bill and I were pretty involved in the ballot initiative.
Oh yeah.
And I talked to a lot of people that are born and raised here, and they said, hey, I might have to sell my place because I can't afford to live here
I know.
anymore. So a lot of people were pretty pissed.
Oh yeah.
And after the legislative session, we went back out because we figured that'd be a good time to get more signatures.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And of course, the state kind of screwed us and said we missed the deadline, which was it was just an ambiguous deadline that they had set before.
Sure.
But
sure.
People are mad.
Oh yeah. There's no
Very
doubt.
very angry.
You bet.
And I told Scott Heiner down at the town hall in Cokeville, who I think he's one on our side.
Oh yeah.
I told him, tell him we're ready with our pitchforks and our
Oh yeah.
and our torches, because we're pissed.
Yeah.
And everyone at that meeting was pretty adamant that they wanted change.
Oh yeah.
And they were tired of this same old status quo and the good old boy system.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Oh,
buzzed
so-
over here.
I would agree 100%. I
Buzzing
think
past my
that
ears.
and I look at that kind of as a positive thing, because like I said, you're not going to see me
Buzzed by
go
bugs.
in and not work with whoever it is, Freedom Caucus or Wyoming Caucus. I'm not going to get tied in, and they've put a ton of pressure on me, both sides already, to join one or the other. But I there's some things that I really think both of them have as good, and I think that they also have as real negative factors. How many bills were killed right off the bat out of committee? I just, like I said before, I think that they should, terrible bills, some of these transgender ones and things like that just had no ability to go anywhere. You're wasting the time, especially when it was only a 4-week session. And so those should have been killed in the committee. Some of those actually made it through, to the floor, versus others. There were others tax reform bills that they simply killed.
What they passed was lame at best.
Oh yeah.
They were pandering to the old time Wyoming residents.
Yeah.
Which I mean, it's good. I think if you're over 75 and you're on Social Security, you should be getting.
Oh yeah.
You should be getting some help or some relief. But they did that. They did the military, and then they.
Yeah.
I mean,
60.
that ballot initiative that we had, it covered everybody.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you've been here 5 years, 25 years, 100 years.
Yeah.
It covered everyone equally.
Yeah.
And really, some of the things that they passed were pretty sketchy under the 14th Amendment, as
Right.
far as whether or not you got fair representation under
Sure.
the law.
Sure.
But they're just pandering to those groups to get it passed.
Right.
Agreed. So
And I really like the cap and I hate to mention anything that's, you know, you say, oh, California had a great idea. Prop 13 rolled everything back to 5-6 years before the huge boom hit, and many of the Northern California residents moved out. 90s, I want to say, and they moved it back and then put a cap on 4% of increase, and that basically saved California in a lot of different ways, because they were headed for destruction, and they still are, but they continue to build on that, you know. But that proposition of stop and cap is got to be looked at more significantly, you know. And the only thing that I would be jumping 100%, because, like I said, I signed the initiative. I think that it's a step that makes people say, hey, they're serious about that. But my only concern about that, and I watched this with the Forest Service, is when you go and you slash government by 50%, and you don't have a lot of ways to say, okay, we're going to raise this money elsewhere, and I don't think you should, because that would just mean another tax. But what happens is typically the administrators stay and the workers go. Forest Service, for example, when they cut back and they lost 60% of their funding during some of Reagan started the big Forest Service cut. They haven't got near the money since that time, and it's kind of went up and down depending on who's in office. But if you notice, the white trucks at the Forest Service didn't end, and the administrators didn't end. It was the people out there providing the services. You can't find workers in the Forest Service because they went and added 2 more cultural specialists, and they added an EPA representative that made sure that they were compliant there. And, you know, I mean, I shouldn't say you got to have people like that, but you got to have some representation from there. But it just went all administration. Forest Service is nothing but administration and jobs that.
Well, and the ballot initiative wasn't necessarily talking cutting government 50%.
Yeah.
It's just cutting
Yeah.
your property tax.
Right.
Half of it, 50%
Yeah.
is tax exempt.
Mm-hmm.
And, we went to the tax meeting up in Alpine, what was it, 2 years ago?
Yep.
Yeah.
And, the representatives were there, and they're talking all this, well, Biden took this away, so we don't have this and all this. Well,
right.
If they didn't see that coming, then we should kick them out.
I know.
Because if you can't plan for a rainy day, and we have $26 million in a rainy day fund that should actually come back to the people.
Oh yeah, and I'm fully for that.
Some of it.
I think it's
good to
$30
keep
billion right now.
$30 billion. I'm sorry.
$30 billion right now.
I
Is the
did a
last time I
Biden
checked.
billion and million instead of billion.
Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah.
It'll look like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got to keep something that's good
Sure.
for the rainy day. But if you have that, you got to use it for something helping the people.
Tell me this.
It's our money.
I'm asking a lot of people about this. What would you retain? How would you raise the other 50%? They pull 50% out of the property tax. So what would be what are some ideas for ways to not make up that money?
First off, you have a surplus in your budget already.
Yeah.
Not spend some money.
Yeah.
So,
the
yeah.
legislature asked for 10.4. I might be a little off. 10.4 billion, and
They did.
Gordon gave them 11.5 billion.
Yeah.
So he's already given them,
More than what they asked for.
more than they even asked for.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Obviously there's some room to cut some stuff.
Well,
And
and
everybody in the legislature has special interests that they're pushing, and they're funding. And there's probably $1 billion right there that you could cut into special interest.
yeah.
You got to spend less.
I was a
It's
cop
not-
for
You
30
got to
years.
spend less.
And as soon as we had any budget issues, they would immediately say, we got to cut fire, we got to cut police.
Oh, yeah.
The kids are going to suffer.
Oh, yeah.
Very
And
emotional.
it's BS because
subject.
those are always going to be taken care of.
They are. Well,
It's the three administrators doing the same job at the school district.
yeah.
Who are overseeing 5 people that are doing the same job. It's
Absolutely.
that kind of redundancy that we can get rid of.
The 30 years that I was in there, there was no doubt about it. And as a teacher's representative, not a union, not the WEA. Don't get me wrong, but the teachers union was always concerned about. We used to have, Lisa will talk about that, instructional facilitators, and they were doing the administrator's job, teaching the teachers, and a lot of times they were ones that unfortunately couldn't teach in the classroom, and so they then put them in charge of teaching the teachers. You remember that big fad?
I do.
And it got thrown out. Finally changed. Said we don't need that. But yet you have an NEA and a WEA that both push what's called a model, and it says you need so many counselors per student, you need so many administrators, and we continue to hear, oh, we're way under that number. We're way under the number that we need. I'm like, what? Because rubber meets the road with the teachers, and you know exactly what you need.
I just thought to answer your question earlier,
Yeah.
how to get the revenue.
Yeah.
If we got rid of the Department of Education, the federal, then we don't send all our money to the federal government, and then they don't send it back to us as if they're giving us something grand.
Yeah,
We
send
keep
them a
the
letter
money
of thank
and we
you.
spend it here.
No, wait, it's our money. Why am
Exactly.
I going to save that? That's going to be the first thing that I think when President Trump is reelected, is I think that you'll see the Department of Education go, as well as he talked about. I can't remember what the others were, 3 or 4 others that.
There's a lot of 3-letter
ATF.
agencies that are on the block.
All of them.
Yeah,
How much-
ATF and redo the DOJ completely.
FBI. they
right.
all gotta go.
How much say does the legislature have with the education?
Well, the education, unfortunately, in the state of Wyoming has become a direct descendant of the
Feds.
national feds. That's the problem. And they have so many strings attached that you're like, now what? Why do we have to do that? Oh, well, you took this amount of money. It's the same with, and I think one of those questions come up on the airport. Somebody asked that, and then Lindsay sent me a few of those questions, and unfortunately, that's something that has already sailed in that, and we didn't really notice that. But if you remember, when the airport has been rebuilt 3 times, our leaders sought millions of dollars in federal funds, and we gave that. And you know what they have written in the tiny print down at the bottom? We control the airport. That's not controlled by the county. It has that on there, but that is all federal. And you know where the pressure of that come out of is Grand Teton National Park, because they want to cut down significantly on the planes landing, because that Jackson Hole Airport's right on the edge of Grand Teton, and
Their approach is right over.
It's in Grand Teton.
It is.
It's the only
Yeah.
airport
It's the
in
end.
in a national
yeah.
park.
And so, see, they shifted a lot of money and said, we've got to put these in areas, and Alpine wasn't big enough to be able to land the planes, and I think that was kind of a snookering job, in that they said, oh, here comes all this money. However, read down to the second page
We own
and find that it is the federal FAA has all of the say as to what happens at our airport.
And Alpine got around that because that's a private airport.
It is. It's all on private land.
Yeah.
So you say there's such a tie with the federal government. Have you reached out to Congresswoman Hageman?
Oh, absolutely.
And what does would she
And-
say she's supporting you?
Very much. Yeah. She's, and I know there's criticism, but I'll tell you what, she's for getting the government out of the lives and federal overreach. And,
She's the best representative we've had in a
Oh,
long
yes.
time.
In a long time.
I
No
love it
doubt.
every
Long
time I
time.
hear her speak. She just
Yep.
nails it.
Is she the best? Maybe
So-
not, but
Yeah.
she's the best we've had.
oh yeah.
So along those lines, then, besides obviously property tax being your number
Yeah.
one deal,
Yeah.
what do you see are the issues for District 21 that you're going to work on, and how are you going to address things like the EPA invading on our water and
Well-
other 3-letter agencies that want to
Yeah.
influence?
Well,
what we
I
do?
just met with Afton the other day, and obviously we've got to be able to break that away, and there's some good news on that, in that we're one of the few that the state doesn't regulate as far as water, and it has the federal government regulates our water in Afton. we got to make sure that we meet the standards of the rest of the state of Wyoming and say at least it's the state, and even better, more locally. You know, here's the guidelines, yes, but they can't walk in. If you look at that process as to how they walked in and said we're going to do a study with the intention of making your water not drinkable, that was
That
People
EPA
didn't
meeting
catch
was a
up.
disaster
Oh,
For them,
for them.
oh yeah.
we were
But good thing
we
people-
were very angry toward
That
them.
and as it should be.
Yeah.
People have got to be more aware, and you know, I honestly think that a lot of my job, I've as part of my campaign pledge, and not just to sound like a greasy politician, but by heck, I will have, if not weekly, bi-weekly, even by the day, as to what's happening, and people know what's going on back in our district. I think communication is huge.
Transparency,
Yes,
100%.
transparency. Because, Lindsay, I really think that Wyoming people are smart enough to be able to run their own state government, and the federal government just plays us for a bunch of dummies, and a lot of times it's the communication part of that kills us. You know, there were some good things that were supposed to come out of the legislature, and they never made it out.
And
a lot of that was just the decisiveness of it.
Yep. I think people are so busy in their everyday lives that they don't
They
pay
do.
attention to some of the small stuff, which, you know, if you have somebody
Well,
like you that's going to
yeah.
tell them the small stuff
Yeah.
that they need to pay attention to, then
Yeah.
that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that my desire to serve it's burning hard, but it's never, you know. I had a guy say, well, you just better sit back and kind of watch what's happening and stay on your committees, and you know, just work on your committees and kind of let that happen. And I said, that's the last thing, and I'm not going to go in there acting like a smart mouth freshman legislator, but I think that I have an ability to make sure that I know what's going on, and I can promise you that's the only reason. My constituents will speak a lot louder than anything else, because I honestly, I'm not looking in any way. In fact, I'm going to lose money, I'm sure. But
Probably.
that's all right. You know,
That would be
I'm
weird
just,
for a politician.
yeah.
And at some point, you could wind up in prison.
Yeah, I could.
Depending on what
I
happens.
could. You
I
know,
got- I got some
they
dirt
said
on him.
they said this.
Okay.
They said,
No, I'm,
We're
I'm
probably
not
gonna
even
need
talking
it.
from our side, from the other side.
Yeah.
I said I'm going to stay there until something's done on property tax. And they said, what are you going to do? You know, you can't just hang out in front of the governors. Well, I'm
Yeah, you can.
that's my attitude. Is I'm not going to walk back and have it say, like one of our legislators said, it can wait till next year. You know, I was told that. There's some good things coming. It can wait till next year. No, it's got it.
That's why we're
'cause-
where we're at. 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
and-
been waiting and waiting and waiting.
Yeah, and my
That's the worst attitude.
you know, I have personal connections in this, and that I've got Kinsey's a registered nurse, makes better money than she should, and
I don't know, those
She's
nurses
not
work hard. I'm married to one.
yeah, she's not
They
going to
do.
be able to live here,
Yeah.
and she makes good money, and then Andy's trying to come back. He's a lineman over in Riverton, and they're seeing a little bit of this escalation and everything, but bottom line, he's scrapping everything in the world together, and he's gonna have a hard time coming back here, and that's a shame because he's a Wyoming boy. You know what I mean?
It is a
And he's a
shame.
Star Valley boy, I should say. You know, he's in Riverton, so he
So,
likes it over there.
Okay, Lane Allred ran on the good old boy. Hey, I'm a cowboy from Star Valley, and
Did.
you should vote for me.
Yep.
And he turns into a turd sickle as soon as he gets there.
Well,
And
let's be.
how are you going to guarantee that you're
I'm not
you're
going
not
to be
going
a
to do
turd
something
sickle.
like that?
Let's
and
be honest.
why?
We saw that coming, though.
Yeah.
Well,
I
Some
saw it
saw
coming.
that coming.
But wait a minute. And then why you over your competitor?
yeah. Let me tell you a little bit, and I've known Lane all his life, and I'm not gonna. I made the promise very first that I'm not gonna go and beat up, although I'm gonna show how different I'm going to be. And Lane
That's what I
told
wanna
me.
know.
Here's was my biggest concern is I talked to him at the very first of the legislative session. He said, this is for young men. This is not for old guys like me. And he said, I 100% run on my reputation of just being a good guy. And he'd get in there, and some of the good old boys would come up, Lane, how you doing? How many head of yearlings you got running this year? And Lane would say, hey, that's a pretty good idea. And he was $704 million. And that's not just from one of these crazy websites that's throwing out numbers that aren't true, but that's the actual spending. He voted for $704 million more than he was number 3 in spending underneath the 2 Democrats.
Well, he wants illegal immigrants to have driver's license, and he was a big Cheney supporter.
Yeah,
And then you could see that coming from a mile away, but
the illegal immigrants, that's and I have absolutely no problem with individuals coming here with correct documentation, and if they go through the steps. But I see that as one of the biggest threats. And they say, Wyoming, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Well, we dang
you
sure
see
do.
a huge influx
do
already.
we have a way to track that? Is there anything, any way?
And if you were, say, for example, and this is kind of not to be a scare tactic, but think about it. If you're a terrorist, are you going to try to fly into LaGuardia airfield or the airport and get in illegally?
Have you ever
You're
seen
not.
LaGuardia Airport?
Well, yeah,
Everybody's illegal there.
I know,
Well,
but you know what I'm
can't do
saying?
that
I mean,
without any problem.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, they're flying them all over the country.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're-
yeah.
Depositing
who
them in
knows?
red states.
And that's
Yeah.
exactly what
Well,
the
you
new
fly them into
technique
Afton,
is.
Wyoming, and there's nobody down there to pay attention to who's coming in and
know.
who's not.
And it's
I'm watching, don't worry,
it's an
I'm watching.
The
FFAA.
guy at the fireworks
Good.
stand is
Somebody needs to watch that.
Oh yeah, that's the illegal immigration in these cards. But here's the trend that's happening there, and you're probably aware of it. You guys know more than I do, but Washington is the easiest state to get a driver's license. You're illegal. You walk in, you give them who you are, and they issue, if you can pass the test, which is bilingual, they give you a driver's license, and then you can, with a driver's license in states, you can vote.
And that's bullshit.
Matter of fact, they'll give
And-
you your voter registration at
And
the same time.
you know what
Well,
they
that's
will
what they're
do is
counting
they
on.
will seek you out. There are departments from the federal government that are seeking out individuals that need additional programs. Woo, that has got to stop. That's got to be
There's
curtailed.
a lot of underhand
Oh,
crap going on.
but
It's gotta
but
be-
yet you say, hey, Wyoming doesn't have that. I was talking to an insurance agent. He said that works here in town, and he said with a Washington driver's license, you can come in to the state of Wyoming. You hand that driver's license there, and they can start papers for work visas or whatever, and they've come illegally originally. And so it's actually rewarding them for having going illegal and knowing how to get around the system.
Breaking the law.
I
But
imagine,
can you
imagine
put-
you could come in with a Washington driver's license and trade it in for a Wyoming one and just disappear
Oh,
in
it
the
doesn't
system.
take. Oh yeah,
Probably.
with that driver's license, think about what you have to establish your residency.
You have any kind of ideas for legislation that'll protect us from that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely not recognize anything that is coming from some of these states that are allowing that. And I know that sounds tough,
No, it
but
doesn't.
yet that's reasonable. Other states are doing it. Other states are
We need to make it
South Dakota.
harder.
South Dakota is you don't get in there on a state. You have to have a social security number, which I think you have to have, or legal documentation for it. And we obviously have to. If you read the Eastern Idaho News last week, they did a 2 or 3 day series on what would happen if and states are all talking about cracking down, especially the interior, because we're seeing more and more of the illegals come here. And they published that 90% of the dairy and farming industry in Idaho is done with illegal immigrants. 90% of their workers are that. And they said, what are you going to do? Well, can't obviously send them all out at once, because that 20 million is the government number of illegals living here now, and I imagine that's way higher. But why are you letting those in the first place? And this.
Well, yeah, allowing them to work.
Well, in Washington and California, I mean, I grew up in Washington when back in the 70s before it became the shithole that it is now. Huh?
Yeah.
Before it went to pot.
Before it went to pot, exactly.
Literally.
Yeah.
And they had migrant workers every year that came up and worked.
Oh yeah.
And they'd come up and work, and then they'd go back south.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a way to do it.
Oh.
We've done it before. We've done it.
Same within California.
Decades.
That's all.
California, same
that's
thing.
all that.
That whole Central Valley.
There's a
migrant
lot.
workers.
There's a lot, and they some places do it right, and they're very effective. There's no doubt that we need that workforce, but
Well,
yet,
you can't send everybody home because then who's going to do that job?
Yeah.
You don't see anybody else out there going to go and work in the field and pick oranges or
And the leftists
strawberries
said that.
or.
They said the loud part, or quiet part out loud. They said the same thing.
Yep, that's right. But yeah, legislation would be just close down those loopholes, and you're not going to see Wyoming participate with that and promote it. You know, I think that again, there's a big appetite for that because it's becoming more and more. I mean, I hate to. I'm not picking on one particular group, but if you read the arrest report, notice that is a half is illegals that are and you know, they're not sending their best and brightest. They're saying, hey, you want to serve a 10-year prison sentence, or do you want to get out of here and never come back to this province in Mexico or whatever? And so they're sending their worst here, and it's easy. I mean, I used to always tell my kids in my class, I said, I'll give you $200, and if you can get across the border easy, and I'll give you $200 if you can make it back in. And obviously I was planning on paying a lot of $200, you know, without documentation is what I'm saying, without having to show or to actually go through a check. These open borders, you know, they literally have cones set up to say, if you have anything legal, go here. If not, just down the fence is a way to get in.
Your detour.
You know, and I've always been a proponent of the wall and control the amount of people, and at least have an idea of what the extent it is, and I hope that continues, because you know, you've seen last couple of years, you've seen even President Biden flirt with that a little bit, because they got so overwhelmed with the numbers that they couldn't even take them fast enough. They couldn't add to government programs to be able to hand them out, the freebies and things like that.
So McKay, can you tell us the difference between you and your opponent? How do you all differ?
Well,
what do you support? You know, and I don't want you to badmouth them.
Oh,
I just want to know what your stance is versus.
Here's the
your
major
opponent.
difference that I see is the ability to unify, and the ability to be an honest representative. And again, I'm not talking bad about him, but if you look, he's a career politician. He's been in the sheriff's office, run for the sheriff's office, served some time in there, was not reelected. He then got into the Lincoln County Commission, was not reelected. Got into the Alpine Town Administrator, and didn't have the 4-year contract, was there 3 years. And so, and again, I'm not saying that's all failed policy, but something went wrong there, and he's running on that premise that I've got all this experience, and I don't know that that's good experience. I'm afraid it's good old boy experience. Mm-hmm. And I going in without the connections, and again, I've had lots of people say, you need the connections. No, I need the voting. I need my constituents, because I think there's enough, and I think the momentum is tremendous right now. I'm not kidding you. It's been the greatest experience for one reason. It's been absolute heck on the other, running and the campaign, but yet what's made it the very best is the amount of support of people that say, I believe you can go in there and make a change. I'm not voting for you for anything that you've done prior to, but I really feel like you can make a difference of standing for the basic principles of liberty and of the Constitution and of true Republican values. And I think that will be night and day different.
I think that's what we need. I think we need just a person and not a politician.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's why Trump was so successful, is because he wasn't a politician. He was just a businessman that just came in and said, I'm tired of the crap.
Yep, and he saw it as these are obvious things. Common sense.
Speaking for the people.
Common sense. That's something that I think will go a long way. And a lot of people say, I'm for common sense government. Well, common sense means that it represents more of the people's view instead of special interests views, you know, of good old boys.
And I think with your background, with what you taught in school, helps you kind of understand both sides without being that politics side too.
Well, I've had to play that, and I've had to even play that in, but sometimes I'm the devil's advocate just because I enjoy getting people fired up. And so I'd like to say that I do understand both sides, because sometimes I've argued it. I don't believe a single thing that I argue, but that's part of being, you know, making people think, making kids think, because you can go in there and hand out a worksheet and guide them along and say, this is the way that it's supposed to be, and this is how our Constitution is, versus, hey, these are the struggles that they're going through to make the Constitution real and make it a part of their everyday life, and they see the examples of it, you know.
So as an educator, what do you see as the challenges in Wyoming education-wise, and what can you do to make Wyoming more competitive in
Well,
in the
I
education
think
field?
there's obviously going to be some accountability pieces of that, and again, I'm getting back to, and I had opportunities to be an administrator and was pushed in a lot of circles of different people. We need you as an administrator, and I'm like, you know what? Education, the rubber meets the road with the teacher, the classroom teacher, and I see that as a major difference, and I've seen us get very top heavy, and it's puts regulations on that absolutely do not make a bit of interest in making kids score better and perform better. It's provide quality teachers and provide support for the teachers and let them teach.
Do you support charter schools?
Well, I like the parent choice in the charter schools, but we're a long ways off in the state of Wyoming from charter schools. And since looking in considerably to charter schools, which I thought at first they're just going to take money and we're not going to have enough support because we're not big enough in the state of Wyoming for charter schools, because it's tremendously expensive to have the brick and mortar schools. And so where are you going to come up with that? Like Alpine's talking about, they've got one contributor that said, I'll build the building if we can get the charter school approved. And so they're saying, well, that's nothing there. But you look at charter schools are struggling. There's been a lot been successful. They open and go great guns, and then they fold because I don't know why they fold necessarily, but they haven't been very successful. But yet I'm huge on parental choice and local control. You know,
What can you do to implement that?
Well, local control is I would fight anything that the legislature tried to say as far as, well, here's the strings that are attached to this money. Set a guideline, and I don't want to use the word model, because the model that we always hear about in Lincoln 2 is it's not a good model. It's very administrative heavy, but I think that the structure and the outline has to be supported, and then let let the local school boards control that and be a part. And I think more and more people will get involved in a grassroots if they can actually see that they can make a difference and run for school board and be successful. I mean, is that what you wanted to do when you run?
I want to educate kids I would love to see our schools educate kids how to read, how to write. You know that we offered scholarships for 30 years. These kids nowadays, they write just like they text. There's no punctuation, there's no spelling, it's horrific. My kids both graduated from Star Valley High School. Neither one of them can read cursive writing. Grandma writes them a birthday card, they have to hand it to me to read it. Every historical document in this country
back to the basics, no doubt.
It's just all our founding documents were written in cursive.
They don't even teach cursive.
If they can get rid of cursive,
they can't let you write.
Kids can't read it.
They're not
Ask them for a signature. They can't even give you a signature. My kid writes his name in block print, and
And one of my grandkids got in trouble
13
for
years of
writing
education
his
in
name in
Lincoln
cursive.
County.
Oh yeah.
And I would love to see something where that go into a Maverick store, or Subway, or any of the convenience stores. Walk
Counting
in there and
change.
have them ring up whatever the value is or whatever you're buying. If you're buying $5.40 worth of groceries or whatever snacks, hand them a $20 bill. Let them enter 20 into the computer, and then put 40 cents on the counter. Like it's
They
over.
can't do it.
They're done.
They can't do it.
They can't. They'll never be.
No.
They'll either start
do it
over.
on a piece of
That's
paper.
too much.
Yeah,
I
they
don't
can't
need that.
figure that out. And I'm like, man, this is just. These are things that I would consider basic life skills.
So you
100%.
see those things. I know you're experiencing them with your kids, right? But what's the legislature going to do to fix this? Because this, if you can't compete on the world market as a young adult, you know, you're smoked. Because the European models and the Asian models and stuff are going to crush you.
I know. I honestly, here 15 years ago, one of my biggest concern was, man, we're sending these kids out and they're successful and they're doing well, and we don't have anything to bring them back to Star Valley because we just didn't have the jobs. Well, still, it's questionable as to whether or not we can bring our brightest and our best back. But then the last few years of education, I was terribly worried about how are they going to survive. That was a big concern of mine. So I think more survival, and I started a program that's called Senior Capstone, and it was more of life skills, and how do you even go write an application to get a job, and you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised 3 years ago, and I have these numbers written down, but 18-year-old kids didn't have a driver's license yet in Wyoming. Ooh.
Is somebody still doing that program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aaron Lancaster does
Good.
it. Yeah, and it's
good.
It's been good.
Job shadow in my
I think that's
classroom all the time.
fantastic. I think that's fantastic. Yeah.
Parents went crazy over it.
It should be mandatory.
He taught
I
them
think
how
so.
to do resumes, how to do an interview, job shadow. It was
How to open a bank account.
How to
A
write
bank
checks.
account.
It was very
Write a check.
How to balance a budget.
Yeah, and don't use Venmo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly.
The government needs to learn
How to
that.
deal with an accident. What do you do?
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
I've had a nephew that's had to call his dad. Oh,
I
what do
know.
I do? How do you not
should be
know
ready.
that?
Yeah,
How to
that
change
should
a tire.
Right?
That should be
How do you
something
not know
that you
that?
automatically.
How to mail
But that-
a letter.
Yeah.
What is
That
is
should start at
interesting.
home.
Yeah.
My
Right.
daughter
That's
didn't
the
even know
problem
where
is
to put the return
The
address.
Parents
Or
are
a
pushing it
stamp.
off on the schools.
Well,
I know.
my one of my biggest things was, and people said, oh, you can just write them an email or you can call them. Like if I had a job shadow that I wanted to set up with Lisa in the special ed, let me just send her an email or a text message, and I'm like, no, you've got to go in. And so I would take them around in the bus, and I would make the kids go in, and there were times that I had to peel their fingers off the door handle of the bus, and I said, I'll
I
be
can't
behind
order
you.
a pizza. I
I'll
have
be
social
behind you.
anxiety.
Yeah. Oh
What?
yeah.
I can't tell them my shoe size at the bowling alley
Yeah.
because that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
What?
I know. It just blows your mind. And you know, sometimes as parents, we're not these, because I know how what kind of parents you are, but we coddle them to the point where we don't ever let anything bad happen to them.
I was just
We
Well, and
always
sometimes
take
it's hard because you don't think about that. You know,
Yep.
like writing a letter and
Yep.
where to put the return address. You don't really think about that until it comes down to it, and you go,
Yeah.
"Oh, I never
but
really
I was
thought I
taught
had to
that in
teach you
school.
that."
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so
So
did I.
yeah.
But I was
So
taught that in
okay,
school.
It's our
now this is how you
responsibility to
do
teach
that.
the
Yep.
children
Yep.
how to, and
Yep.
I see them getting coddled at work, and it drives me crazy. I say I'm like, no.
Yep.
And it's
gotta make
become
them be like
the
adults, but-
responsibility of the parents to teach your children how to
Yeah.
count change,
Yeah.
or tell the
not
time
good.
on a analog clock, or you know what happened to that stuff in school that was
Yeah.
something that they learned in elementary school
Yeah.
by like 3rd grade.
Yeah.
So
And you know, I know I haven't hit anything probably dead on, but just the philosophy of more individual personal responsibility and that being taught. I have 6 employees right now. We're cutting under the power lines for Lower Valley Energy, and it is a comedy when I come home and some of the things that I tell Heidi as to what happened. But my policy, or my theme this year, and it sounds a little bit hectic, but it's called gas. I'm always saying, "You got gas today?" Yeah. Well, let's give a shit.
No, nice.
Care. Care that you know, that not this, that you're gonna come and get your check, but I mean, I know you're only I'm paying $23 an hour, which is pretty dang good, I think.
I think
But
that's pretty good.
care about it. You know, I told a kid to put up the tailgate on a brand new 35-gallon that we take over there to spray out the radiators, and I said, make sure that you put up the tailgate. He walked right over, got it in the truck, backed up, and run over the tank. And I'm like, how much gas you got going on today? Oh, not too much. I said, well, you're gonna care because that was $250, and that's coming out of your paycheck now. He's like, I guess I'll care a little more about it. Have some gas, man. You know, and that's I don't know. That's gonna be a learning curve, I'm sure, as to how to translate that. But I back to your question as to why I think that, and the whole reason that I run is I'm gonna stay with it, and I'm not going in there to just kind of learn the ropes, and I'm not going in there to just kind of, I'm a member of the legislature. I could care less about that. But I'll promise you, have me back in 2 years, and we'll lay it all out, and I'll hopefully be able to say this is how we found a way to do this, and you'll see it through my voting record. Now be careful of some of those websites that are, because some of those, like for example, one that gave a clown rating, as it was called, to individuals that didn't vote to have a bill pulled out of committee, and so they all got called clowns, and it was a bill that very much needed to come out, but people are like, if it's been killed in committee, and it was killed by a group of people that specifically went in because, again, another person, an enemy's name was on the top of the bill, he got the clown rating because he didn't vote to have it come out. There wasn't a vote. The Speaker of the House, Summers, didn't call for a vote. So all these people in the legislature, just because of being in the legislature, got this negative rating, and it was all because Summers didn't call to have it come out. And so there's a lot of those things that, and you have to be aware of that. And like I said, on my weekly, daily, whatever it is, I will tell you exactly why I'm voting, and I'll tell you who I've talked to about it, because I've got a steep learning curve. There's no doubt about it, but yet I think I know enough about government in the first place. Well, I taught the Constitution for 30 years, and I taught it not out of the textbooks, but out of how you're going to see it in a day-to-day basis. And so I think with that and my ability to get along and my ability to work to really find a solution to the problem is going to be what sets me distinctively different than anybody else.
So a suggestion with the transparency of your day-to-day or week-to-week whatever, I would say maybe talk about the bills, because some people don't have the time to even look into it and say, okay, this is bill number such and such, this is what it's talking about, this is why I'm voting for it or against it, this is why I think it needs to go through or not.
And just Monday morning I've been digging in to try to see what were all the bills. I wanted copies of them, and that legislative website is iffy
hard.
at best. It's hard to navigate it. You can find it, but you just about have to spend a lot longer than you should have to.
But by the time you find it, you're so frustrated that you're like, I give up.
I know.
So I don't even care anymore.
Yep. And so I asked Dan Dockstetter some questions, and he put me on a conference call with Debbie Painter, the assessor, and holy, that was very informational. And I was able to say, why didn't the bill that was supposed to cap it at 4%, why didn't we see that, or why aren't we going to see a little bit of relief from that? And he said, no matter what your scoundrel real estate agents say, right there, that'd be him. Why would you or why didn't we see some relief in that? And said, our values are not down yet, so that 4%'s not doing any good. The values are staying up, even though not selling as much. Correct, Nick? Correct me on.
As much, yep.
Yeah, but yet, have you seen the property values go down?
They haven't dropped nearly what I'd anticipated.
Okay, and here's what that I was talking about at the very first. I said, if we put it in the legislature's hand and we pass it as a point of constitution, that the legislature can deal with that instead of just every 2 years dealing with it. If you're able to put that into statute, that will be a lot better, because then they can go in and say, this value is extreme for Ty and Lisa, when their value of their home is because of this one right here.
Yeah.
That's not right.
Yeah, but my place offsets it, though.
I wasn't going to go there, but since you did.
Every one of us thought it, Nick, but we
didn't want to say it out loud.
Everyone is thinking it, and they're like,
oh,
shit.
It was.
Doesn't
Did you
Wyoming
notice
statute?
Did you notice the quiet that went right before he said that? Everybody's like,
Yeah, nobody knew whether they should
That's
laugh or
all.
not.
That was great.
I always laugh at Nick.
That was great.
Doesn't the Wyoming state statute say that the market the assessed value is based on the market value, which is the last price that it basically sold a property sold for?
Yeah, it does, but it only has it that you can put that in for 2 years. That's not a permanent, and that's one of those provisions in that bill, is that's got to go as to a certain percentage of what it's sold for.
That's why our ballot initiative was great, because it does. That's permanent.
Yeah,
it doesn't come back. It ain't just 2 years.
Yep, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
And now they're charging, and there's no way my property's worth $500,000.
Yeah, you look at what they've got as
It's
values.
crazy.
Oh,
There's no way my property's worth $500,000. I don't care how you look at it.
I know.
Yep.
I know.
But that's what it's
That's
valued
what we
at.
just heard.
Yep.
McKay, would you support, or would you be willing to implement something where, based on what we've dealt with Governor Gordon, some sort of constitutional amendment for the state of Wyoming to take away his appointment powers as far as like wildlife commissioners, things like that, where they should be elected individuals and not at the discretion of the governor to appoint those individuals
Great
for
point.
6-year terms.
Yep. Great
based
point.
on.
Well, look at the director that he just appointed.
I know,
Exactly.
but for me, the biggest issue is Lincoln County. We share our commissioner with 4 counties. We're one of only 2 of those commissioners that are shared between 4.
Yeah.
The way that it's structured on a 6-year term, and the fact that we rotate through 4 counties.
Yeah.
Afton, Wyoming is the largest populous center of Lincoln County, and we'll go 75 years without a commissioner coming from our valley.
Yeah.
And that's all predicated on the fact that the Constitution now allows the governor to make those appointments. And the governor makes those appointments on the last day of the legislative session, so that nobody's going to disagree with them.
They never come back for that special session.
No, they're
which
not
they
going to come
should
back.
have.
Everybody's going home, and so then we're stuck with whoever the governor decides to appoint.
Unfortunately, that's the way it's been. But
I know.
Oh,
but we
absolutely.
could change that.
Oh, and I think that can't say all, but most positions should be elected.
That's what I'm driving at, is
all
because if you
should be
look
elected.
at the last day of the legislative session and you look at the number of appointments that the governor makes on his way to the airport,
It's called we the
leaving.
people.
I mean, there's the vast majority of those positions, in my opinion, if they're going, especially the paid positions, should have some voice from the citizens of Wyoming to elect those positions. But that's not going to happen if we don't have legislatures that are willing to push for a new constitutional amendment to change that protocol.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I'm very that's a core value. That's a core plank is elected positions over appointed positions.
Just
make me
look at our
crazy.
federal government right now.
Yeah.
And the appointed positions there.
Well,
oh my gosh.
And I used to share this with my kids, but it was when President Clinton came in, and we actually did a little more intense study as to how many of the government appointees were had to have his approval to make him or what he approved. And I said, do you even know that many people? I mean, and unfortunately, recently, what happens is they look back and say, oh, you were on my campaign committee.
Yes.
I'm going to put you in charge of the EPA.
Or it comes back to donations in the state
Oh,
of Wyoming.
it
You brought me
does.
coffee
It does.
once.
I mean, if
It's pay to play.
if you're going to
it
donate
is.
money to get those commission positions, I
You're just
think
buying.
that just harbors
No,
or breeds
no.
an atmosphere of
Well,
corruption.
look at Mike Smith. You remember Mike? He was the commissioner.
$30,000 to freaking government.
Well, yeah, but he did. But why did he get fired then? Why did Gordon take him off? You know why?
Yeah,
He
'cause
wouldn't wear a mask.
Yeah, stood up to him.
Whoa.
And so they appointed Roberts.
Yeah.
And it was fast. You know, I'm sure you've all read about the appointee in the Department of Health that come out and spoke against transgender. What did Governor Gordon do? He's gone. He's out of a job.
And see, I don't think that the governor in the executive branch should have that much control over those individual positions. That should be the people that are actually directly related, or that those commissioners or those appointed positions that make those decisions directly affect the citizens of Wyoming. We should have some say in who's making that decision, I would think.
100%.
Should be. Yeah, because I still go back to the ones that are voting, and I don't know if I'd compare them to you, because I've seen some of the stuff that you've done and the things that you've talked about. They're not going to be all as educated as that, but I still have faith in the educated voter and the person that knows what's going on. They're in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. They should be making those decisions, not somebody that you're simply looking to fill a
Spot.
body, a warm.
Or do a favor
warm
for.
body.
Yeah, so McKay, that's one,
Yeah.
and I know you've already touched on it a little
Yeah.
bit, but if you get elected, there's lots of lobbyists and special interest groups and stuff like that are going to vie for your support
Oh, yeah.
on various different things.
Yeah.
What are you going to do to, because I worry as a voter saying, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to vote for you,
Yeah.
and you're going to be elected,
Yeah.
and you get there, and then you're going to kowtow to these guys because
Yep.
they're giving you money for whatever
Yep.
interest that you have. How are you going to combat that, or how are you going to address that so that you're not kowtowing, I guess,
Yep.
or whatever, to the
Absolutely.
special interest groups or whatever that
and that comes back to both the Freedom and the Wyoming Caucus have both been fairly heavily involved in saying hey, we want you to commit, we'll endorse you and things like that. And that's a little different than some of the special interest PAC money. But I tell every single one of them, if they're interested in donating, well, I have to back up. I have to tell the story about Heidi. She said, you know what we're going to spend on this campaign? And I'm like, I would rather spend it rather than go out and grovel at the feet of PACs.
Yeah.
Now, you know, when you have a
I
rich...
don't know if I would. No.
She clearly said that. She said, what? We're going to spend our own money, and we will spend a lot of our own money. And you know what? I have told every single group that has offered to donate or sends me the letter, we're endorsing you, and this will be a check. It's immediately sent back and say, I appreciate that, but if there's any strings attached, and that's easy to say, you know, but I honestly, I don't care. I don't care that you've donated. That was your choice to be able to do that, and this is where I can show you exactly where it's going to be spent, you know, on.
So this kind of taps into your question, whereas coming in and, you know, winning whatever and becoming part of the good old boys club, you know, whereas you have the right last name in the valley, everybody knows the Ericksons,
right.
So so you wonder, okay, do we need to worry about that, because is he going to become one of the good old boys? And you know,
to experience it, I'm glad that you brought that up. I had a guy in my house for 3 hours talking, and he had a pile of questions that he was going through and asking and putting on there, and he was, I can bring you 30 to 50 votes, but you got to agree with these things. And I said, you know, that's great. I'd love the 30 to 50 votes, but there's going to be some things that we disagree, and I'm not going to tell you that I agree with every single thing. And he put some pressure, and he said exactly that. He says there's 10 names in the valley, and I'm well aware of the Erickson name being that, but I always say, good heck, guy, you have to take into account I have Nick as a nephew. Wouldn't that be
it averages out.
I mean,
balance.
And if he gets out of line, we can always call Dustin, and that will cure all of that.
And you know what? One of the best ones was Dustin was in my house, and he brought 2 people the other day, and I finally, after 3 hours, I'm like, Dustin, do you think I've earned my vote? And he goes, probably not. Yeah. And he specifically said, well, you are cousins with the superintendent, and I schools, and blah, blah, blah. He goes on and on and on. I'm like, hey, that makes you even more important to say, is McKay his own person? And I'll hook on to the Erickson name because I'm very proud of that, but yet I don't think that you'll see me. Well, I know you won't see me as a good old boy, and I know that you will not look back and say, well, that's the only reason that he got elected, and that's the only reason that he's having success in the legislature. You won't be ashamed. You won't be sorry for that. Now you'll still give me a hard time, and I know I want it, because you know I'd do the same to you. But
you know you're going to get it from me.
Oh, well, let's see. I look up in my phone how many messages since the first of the month have I got from that character.
And
let's go ahead.
Your campaign's going to cost you a lot more money, because as soon as the primaries are over, I'm stealing all the panels he's got his signs hooked up. I can build 2 round pens out of what he's got.
I knew that was coming right off the bat. I
Yeah.
said, these will be great because Dustin's draft horses have leaned on my fences, and they all have a banana shape in them.
Yeah.
I told her, we've got to have new fences, and that's a great way to hang signs on. But you were the first to say, hey, I'm building a new horse corral, I'm taking all those panels. But I've had about 5 or 6 others that already have put little tags on them saying, these will go right to my house.
The polls close at whatever, 7, and
You'll
I'll
be
there
out
at
there
7:04.
5 minutes before.
I'm going to probably do a little earlier gather up. I think people will forget where I had the signs, and I'll go get them before that, because I'm not going to take a chance. There's too many people eyeing those over.
You talked about voters and educated voters and all of that stuff. I've always felt that if you just strictly on the property tax issue, because most mortgages, or a lot of mortgages, the property taxes are included in the mortgage, or if they're not and people are sending a check. I've always felt if you want to educate the voters about government and taxes, you would not allow them to mail their property taxes in a one lump sum. If they had to go to each individual business that received that property tax, and you had to go write a check to the hospital, the school district,
say
the
this is my percentage of you,
the sheriff, then I think
that's an important part, because you get looking at where does it go?
And when they start talking about mill levies, and most people don't understand the mill levies and who gets what mill levy, and then our illustrious legislatures always tell us, well, if they're not using their maximum allotted mill levies, then we lose the revenue. They've always got some line of chirp crap that I freaking get so sick of listening to. But if every person in this county had to go write a check to the hospital, to the Weed and Pest, to the school district, to the freaking ski resort in Cokeville, like, people would start paying attention to where that revenue went and how it was utilized.
Mark the bucks, I've always said. Mark the dollars and show where they come.
Here's another one for you, Whitey. When you're in there too, change up the whole thing with our registration. When you go to get your vehicle registered.
Oh yeah.
Registration is just a way that they don't have to say it's a vehicle use tax.
Oh, I know.
Get it changed. Put it on there and say we're going vehicle use tax, and that way everyone's like,
I had
another tax.
I had somebody just tell me the other day that
fuel tax
said,
on top
man,
of it.
in fact, it was the guy at the port of entry. He's a ex-military guy and just retired and come back. And he said, yeah, we looked around and Wyoming was so good on the tax bracket and didn't have income tax. And then he said, and I went and registered my cars, and I did this and I did that, and I said, hey, Wyoming's just a lot better at making it see like something of just living in Wyoming. It's a tax. It's a tax.
Register it. In fact, seriously, make it change. Make it just be accountable. It's like
absolutely.
Vehicle use tax.
Call it what it is.
More direct.
I say it when I go into the DMV. I'm like, I'm here to pay my vehicle use tax, and the old gals back there just look at me like, kind of look away a little, and I'm like, that's what it is.
It takes a lot. I give a lot of time. I say to government employees, and I taught school, so actually in some people's mind I'm a government employee, which I'll go with, but I think I earned my keep there. But I can you really look people in the eye when you get your check? You know, government employees, can you? And they're great people, and lots of us are from that, but yet I think people need to look at it more like that of, hey, this is hard-earned money from people. You better be able to look that person in the eye and say, this is where that money's come from.
Well, I will say this, though, about Whitey. Of course, I was raised around and we logged for about 10 years together. Of course, that was when I was about 11, 12 years old.
Yeah. You hear all those stories, you know. He his famous one is he used to have to peel poles, and he says all we gave him was a piece of rebar instead of a draw knife.
That's true. I had to bark it off with a rebar.
It wasn't bad.
I had to wet it with my tears because it was so awful, and then the bark would slide off eventually.
I remember looking out one
snow,
time.
right?
We shouldn't get telling Nick stories, but he's kind of falling asleep over top, and he's got his draw knife, and his hair's hanging down on the side like this, and I'm like, I wonder if he's going to move anytime soon. But he stayed in this position with his draw knife. So it looked like he was working. Rebar.
Yeah, rebar.
Yeah.
But think of how far you've come since then.
I was having dark thoughts about the draw knife.
No, that's it.
Hey, this is what I will say, though, about Whitey. I mean, he was a school teacher for a long time. He was a damn good school teacher. No doubt about that, which is good. I'm not big on the government employee side thing because I think it separates too many people from reality. I've always written my own check, and of course, you can see the fruits of it right now. White trash bill, all right? But the reality is...
You got a hell of a dirt lot.
That's right. Thank you, yes. Thank you. And it's paid for, too.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I mean, he's a hard-working son of a bitch as you gonna get. That's what it is, man. I've seen that guy go for just days, and he will work you in the ground.
And I think that's what I'll take is my work ethic.
And he's real he is real manageable. I mean, we debate stuff, reunions and this and that. We'll back and forth on all sorts of stuff, and you can hear him talk. But he's definitely real manageable to be able to talk to, and he'll hardline some stuff and hold to it pretty well. I mean, outside of him being my uncle, he's easily the best. He ain't even close. as far as Canada. And biggest thing is transparency, and then the ability to come back, meet with people, groups like this again and again and again.
And I want
just
critique.
have the real voices be heard, because you're looking at a real cross. This is we the people. This is is what it looks like.
This is who it is.
Yeah, if you can come back and get the critique and go, and we all get together and say, "Whoa, this is not okay," then you can go back and go, "Okay, wait, I gotta think about this differently."
Yep.
Yeah, that's what Harriet does that. I mean, I get her email every
Sunday
week.
morning.
I know.
Yep, every Sunday morning I get her email what she's doing. And
the roundup.
I know.
I've
and I
emailed
like
her. I don't
that.
know how many times she gets back to me.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right away. Or one of her people. I mean,
Well, and that's
they get back.
You look at that. She came in at a good time, and I don't know how anybody could have voted for Cheney, in personal opinion, as to what she did. However, Harriet run on that. Hey, I'm one of you. I'm the grassroots. I'm the this is the way it's going to be. And
She's walking the
come
walk.
through. She's come
It's
through
not
with her
fake.
promises.
Yeah.
Can you look into your crystal ball and tell us who you think is going to be the next governor of the state?
I've been asked that, and I've tried to look into that. I don't think there's a leading candidate right now. I don't, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think a lot of it will be determined on how successful the state of Wyoming is in the next 2 years, whether it be someone that come out of the legislature or out of the elected positions. I don't know. I don't see anyone really stepping up. Do you?
Well, I mean, I voted for Brett last time.
Oh,
I met him several times, and he's a good guy.
Oh yeah.
I think he's fallen behind because he's not getting his name out.
I got to talk to him and see.
But
and he was behind the.
I really did. I really enjoyed working with him and talking with him.
Yeah.
So him for sure.
Yeah.
From on the legislative side, I don't see anybody in that group that I'd vote for.
Yeah. I think it's got to come from outside.
McKay, if one thing you can do while you're running around talking to people like this, tell them they got to vote in the primary.
Oh, I know.
Because Gordon,
Gordon, that's how he got it.
Yeah, Republicans vote like 85 to 90% in the general. 30% in the primary.
Well,
so Gordon got elected with 30% of the vote, and then all of a sudden you go in on the general, and here's the R, so everyone goes, oh, he gets it. So he got it by a landslide, but he was not. I mean, he's a New York Democrat.
Yeah. And a Sierra Club member.
Oh yeah.
And secretary there.
I know all. I was opposed to
tell people vote in the primary. The primary is so important, and people usually gaff it. It's kind of like a midterm. They kind of gaff it off, like, whatever.
I know.
But this was going to be a weird one because the GOP convention's next week, and our primary's not till August. It's like, I don't even understand how you can do that.
I know. Strange.
I mean, I get it. Okay, we got one candidate, and he's the leading candidate. Everybody's going to vote for him. But you haven't had, you can't do your convention before all your states have duly appointed their.
I know. Yeah.
So I don't. So this primary is going to be a wash because nobody's going to show up.
Well, that's something that is in our third phase of our campaign that we've already spent a lot of time about, and most of my posts are going to go from policy to this is where you vote, this is how you can get registered. You're not, the only way that you can't register as a Republican and vote is if you've been a Democrat, because that was May 15th that you had to,
declare.
because they had so many that were shifting over to pick the
Flip-flopping.
more moderate. You know that technique that happened, and that was a good thing that happened there. But it's also it makes people wonder, can I? Because the misinformation is out there, but I was going to share the numbers. Like last time in the primaries, Lane got 1,700, and the Hardesty guy got 12 or 1,300. We should have had 8,000-9,000 votes cast.
Yeah, where's everybody else?
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me? I had to look at those, and I asked who showed them to me. I said, are those the real numbers there? And I hate to project too much, but I think you'll have quite a few more voting in this primary. I think that you've seen some interest already, and I think because of the 4 candidates being so varied for county commissioner, I think you'll see a lot of people come out and say, I better cast my vote, and that's what I'm banking on, because probably shouldn't use these particular terms, but I'm a little bit afraid of the vote if the good old boy vote comes out, but I'm not afraid of the vote, and I think there will actually be a mandate in my favor if I can get people that know me to come out and vote. Because, you know, it could be, hey, you know, he served in the he served in the
It's a
county
familiar
commission.
name.
It's a
that's
and the
it.
Erickson name is there, but like I said, we have our checks and balances in that name. So.
Hey, McKay, what's your
an
thoughts
Erickson.
on the Natrium nuclear reactor?
You know, that one's gonna. I'm gonna. Politicians always say, "Let me get back to you on that." I've been
Circle
in
back.
communication with all three of the commissioners because there was clearly a concern, and not just the question that come in from this particular group, but I've received a lot of that, and it's the same as the Meta, the Facebook coming into Cheyenne. I'm a pro nuclear energy guy, and especially where Wyoming's got the resource to be able to do that. I love to see the money coming in. I just am very careful and hesitant about it because of what that could put on our tax base without being supported by the company, and it's going to all fall on Lincoln County. And because you bring 1,700, or probably more than that, I can't remember what the number was. A lot of people it's 3,000
They're
to
saying
build.
12,000 initially.
Yeah.
12,000.
And that's
then
the
they drop it
support
down.
and everything. Yeah, that's right. I think they think
That's
that
for
it'll
the
be
construction.
3,000
Yeah, right.
jobs.
Yeah.
3,000
And then there'll
jobs when it gets going.
Right.
And then
And
but
so
I mean, you got Bill Gates involved, TerraPower, which
That's
is involved with the
Scary
CCP.
I know it.
yeah. My fear
And,
is
I'm all
who's
for nuclear energy, but
involved.
Yeah.
I'm very, very concerned
Oh yeah,
about that.
where that came out of.
Yeah, and
Right.
plus
You know,
they
how did that
got
get the-
funding from us, from taxpayer money, to
Yeah.
buy that mine
Yeah.
to
I
do
know
what
it.
they're doing.
I know it. I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm working on that. That's something that I'm trying to get a better answer because at one time I'm like, oh, this is a terrible idea, and then the other I'm like, I think that it has some possibilities, but I've
be
got
a good
ideas.
idea without
I think the
characters
resources
involved.
are
Yeah.
there, and I think
Characters
that's
involved.
The players
positive.
the
But
players.
the people involved is what's scary for
Yeah.
Wyoming, not
You're
just for
If you look
the
at
country,
Gates'
but
history
for
of what
Wyoming.
he's done to
Yeah.
Yes,
to the world,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're
That's-
like, you know what? I can
Stay out
this
of
is not gonna work.
Wyoming.
I'd say evil is
That's
not,
mild.
Not
That's a nice
out of
term.
bounds. Yeah.
Nice
That's
term.
a nice term.
Agreed. And I've dealt with some of the food things that he's had his fingers in, and the labeling the food and different things like that. So, and then of course his COVID stance. And,
He's one of the largest landowners in the country,
yeah.
and yet he's also involved with the Impossible Meats. So he's
Right.
playing both ends, and he's trying to kill the cattle industry so that
Yeah.
he can make money on this side feeding
crickets.
us bugs.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not a good guy. So
Let me get back
can't-
on. And I know that there's no doubt about it.
Keep an eye on
That's
him.
there's no doubt about it. But it's kind of an interesting mix, I think. But I'm as worried about the RMP, the Rock Springs Management Plan on the BLM as anything.
was gonna ask you
just
about
that.
because that how they've done the rulemaking. However, if you look at the Supreme Court decision last week that takes the rulemaking away from the agencies, they can't just make those rules.
Will that Chevron deference
Yep,
have
the
a
Chevron.
bearing on that?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Huge.
Good.
That in fact they
That was a landmark
supposedly
decision.
they're back to the drawing board because they're like, oh, it's not like we're going to get that overturned anytime soon, and we have done nothing but done rulemaking within agencies instead of going through the public process, and that's a travesty. And that's a lot of people said exactly that. Why are you picking the government overreach and multiple use of public lands as one of your planks? That's exactly it. We have got to keep to where the government can't come in and shut down the entire Powder River Basin through
Yeah.
any type of. I mean that is
Exactly.
ridiculous.
Will that case also kill any of this, the conservation easement and the I can't think of the
carbon exchange?
not the carbon exchange, but the shoot, It's where the publicly traded
Oh yeah.
stocks
Yeah.
of companies that own they basically buy public land
Yeah.
and then close it off to the public.
Right.
The natural
there's-
assets.
The Middle Ridge is one that's being considered for that right now. If the conservation
that will
group
kill
buys
that,
it,
right?
oh yeah,
Okay.
because that's in the rulemaking. See,
Yeah.
that's the agency rulemaking that's been done with that, because that wasn't ever something that was brought up by regular policy or statutes.
Yeah.
There's another place you can save a lot of money and tell Gordon to quit pumping carbon into the ground.
Yeah.
At
Only
$800
$85 million in the
million.
last 2 years.
Yeah.
$800 million.
Was it 800?
Yeah, I think I heard it was 800 million, but it might have been a little bit less than that. But
Oh.
No, that's what I saw. $800 million.
and that's his
400 million a year.
that's his slush fund.
Crazy.
What time is your meeting?
It was at 7:30. What time is it?
Almost 8:30.
Hey, good meeting.
Like I said, I love it. I appreciate it. This is my kind of thing. Yeah, the other one is just it's setting the rules for the forum at the fair, so that's why I wanted to have a little say in that, because I'm vice chairman of the Republican committee, so executive committee, so I kind of want to have a little bit of say to that.
Yeah.
This is Wyoming. There are no rules.
There shouldn't be rules.
Well,
Suck it
sometimes
up, man.
there.
You gotta walk
That's
in
the
there
thing
and-
that you got to watch is sometimes there's
have our own
rules for
rules.
certain people, but there's not for others.
That's where the good old boys come into play. Yeah. Okay.
No, I appreciate your involvement, and I like I said, I more than welcome. A lot of times, I'm out of the woods, so a phone call is not the greatest. But man, my email, then it gives me a little bit of time to think, and I would be glad to look into anything of that. And we looked specifically. I had a couple of friends that were very concerned about the predator and the Roberts kid that killed the wolf over there and then paraded it in, and what all that's done, unfortunately, has made it to where national groups are now in after our predator numbers, and if you look at what the predators just this year, because the mule deer numbers are way down, and all the predators are still left on the landscape, they didn't have very many fawns to feast on, and so 30 of 37 that were had the chip in them, 30 got killed by predators. So the deer is never going to come back unless, and especially if we do a hold, which a lot of people are afraid the new Game and Fish Commissioner is going to do, is going to say, we better look at the way we take care of predators, and predators are
They have to be managed too.
Yeah, they do.
Just
And
like
I'm not
everything else.
saying they shouldn't have been paraded into town.
No.
There's no doubt, but yet you have so few, and we got such a black eye for that. Any hunter, anybody that snowmobiles, everything was the smack and whack, and all the yoked, what they call it, the yoked smoked, and running over, and I'm like, I do have to admit that I've run over a coyote or two, but that was in my other.
He shouldn't have been standing there.
It was in the way.
You know, if it's coyote or you get
Wyoming's
ditch,
version
you
of
could
Christine Home.
probably
You
think
just
about
go out and kill the dog.
Yeah.
Nice, Whitey.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and I'll sneak out. And
Thank you.
Let y'all
Appreciate it. Get to your next
beat me
meeting.
up. Yep. Thank you. And again, if you have anything else like this, or you have others that would like to visit, that'd be great.
For
Do you
sure.
have
Took
any
us a little
material
while.
or anything
We
with you
appreciate
that
you
you
coming
can
out and
leave
talking
for
to
us to distribute to some people?
we that's bad to say, but I kind of wanted to let things kind of settle out and really see what the most important things were, and so I put out my platform and my planks, and then we've kind of been seeing where I've got the most feedback, and first of next week we'll have all the pamphlets and the literature out. I have my website up and going, and it's building. It's getting a lot better.
Okay, and your website is
Erickson4Wyoming.com.
Okay.
The number 4.
Yeah, the number 4.
The number 4.
Okay.
Okay.
And then my social media, my niece is running that. Had a lot of pressure too.
She's like 12, right?
Well, it's actually Nick's sister.
So she's into the social media.
it's
She
12.
knows how to do that.
She's good. Yeah, that's the thing is that I have to have a lot of the youngsters say now, how do I get in and see where my comments are?
Yeah.
And I'm fairly literate, but I wouldn't say. Yeah. I don't know.
What about yard signs? Have you?
Yes, I do. We should have brought some of those. We were going to. We walked out, but I would personally deliver you one if you wanted one. So.
Like me, you would? You'd deliver me one?
Well, over here, I see that you put up yours illegally out here on the. Did you know that's in the right of way, and I'm gonna get fined by the county?
Oh,
they
it
go
really
in and
is?
look.
I did it.
You have to have it on the back of the
purpose,
fence.
The back of the fence.
The back of the fence. So it has to be on the property and not on the right
Not
of way.
on the right of way.
That's tough.
That is tough.
So there you go.
Right now in the middle of the road.
Yeah, right under the stop sign.
Painted it on the road.
And he said,
Lock off.
"It's on yours."
It's on ours. Coming down into our.
Oh yeah, I'm suing your ass.
I'm done.
This is a rough group down here. You know, you look at who lives down this road alone. Holy crap! Thank you, sir.